What's good, everybody? I'm BPC and welcome to Competitive Origins MMA. Well, 46-year-old Anderson the Spider Silva returned to combat sports. Yes, the greatest of all time, but not in the form of MMA. No, he returned in the form of boxing on the pay-per-view called Tribute to the Kings, which was headlined by Julio Cesar Chavez Sr. as he faced off in his last fight, which was an exhibition match against Hector Camacho Jr. And then you have Chavez's son, who faced off against Canelo Alvarez's brother. And then you have Chavez's other son, the former WBC Middleweight Champion of the world, Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., who faced off against Anderson the Spider Silva. Now, with that being said, Anderson was a big underdog. I'm talking plus 300 for the former middleweight champion of the world. Now, it's quite understandable, though. He was 1-1 in his boxing career, and he hadn't even fought professionally in boxing in over 16 years. With that being said, there was also the 11-year age gap. As I said, Anderson was 46 or is 46 years old. You know, for some reason, the commentators thought he was 42. You know, I wish Anderson was 42, but he is 46 years old. Now, you also have to take into account that, Junior had 58 professional boxing fights. That's significant. That's a lot more than the 2 fights that Anderson had. So he had a ton of experience, and that's why the odds makers felt, when you combine everything together, that Anderson Silva would be the underdog. Now, before I continue, make sure you hit that subscribe button, click the notification bell, and hit the like button on this video. We're pumping these videos out left and right, and we want you to be able to know when they do release, so be sure to support the channel and check them out. Now, with that being said, round number 1 started, and Anderson was just basically getting the timing all together. He was doing a little bit of circling. Junior caught him with a really good hook, but Anderson seemed unfazed, which was good to know. He was definitely going to be able to handle the power that a professional boxer was going to be able to dish out. Now, as round number 2 started, you saw, Anderson getting more aggressive. He was doing a little bit of dancing. He was landing body shots. He was landing uppercuts. He had his hand down. He was really starting to feel it. As round number 3 started, Anderson had a lot of head movement, but then Junior started showing some aggression, and Anderson went right back at him. Now, what kind of worried me just a slight bit was that when he came at him, he kind of like lunged at him. His hands were down and he was throwing shots, lunging at him. And it kind of reminded me a little bit of the Uriah Hall fight. His last professional fight at MMA, where he was actually winning the rounds. But then, he got caught, as he was lunging in and doing all these moves, just getting really aggressive. So that's what worried me just a little bit. But then he settled down. He started flowing a lot. He was feinting and he was landing these shots. And then, he went into the corner, and on 2 occasions, he called for Junior to meet him in the corner, obviously putting himself at a disadvantage. But for you Anderson Silva fights, you would definitely remember this from the Stephan Bonner fights, where he stood against the cage, let Bonner try to take shots, moved out the way, came back in and said, let's do this, And Silva ended up popping him, and then he walked back into the corner. Chavez Jr. tried to hit him. Anderson blocked and kind of laughed in his face. Now, as round number 4 started, you saw more vintage Anderson Silva. He was throwing uppercuts. He was throwing jabs. He was throwing hooks. He was really just getting into it even more. And then round number 5 started, and, Chavez was actually looking at the referee, kind of like, honestly, I don't know why. You have somebody that's here to punch you in your face, and you're there staring at the referee. Are you looking for him to bail you out at the end of the day? And that's what it kind of seemed just a little bit. Anderson was bobbing and weaving. You saw his great footwork. He was landing shots. He was just doing this thing every single round. And as round number 6, started, that's 75% of the fight, right? And Anderson came out just looking fresh. He was landing combos, He even got into the whole phone booth style fighting, like he would be against the ropes and let, Chavez come after him. He would have Chavez against the ropes and try to bully him, or they would just stand and, go telephone fighting, and, obviously Anderson would also back him down, and, during the whole fight. So it was quite interesting, As round number 7 began, Anderson continued to utilize this type of shoulder roll technique. He would use his shoulder to block and then roll out of it and land an uppercut. It was great, and he did it throughout the fight, And then the final round number 8, all through this, Chavez's corner had been stating, you're losing every round to him. You have to be more active. You got to be more productive. You got to do something, and I felt like it lit the fire in Chavez Jr. He wasn't just going to quit. He came out, he landed a really good combo, and you're thinking like, okay, well, if he did this combo and showed this speed and this level of accuracy, throughout the entire fight, this would be a very, very close fight. But then you have to wonder, well, would he be able to survive, make it? That obviously takes a lot of energy. And would he be conditioned enough to continue that pace all through the fight, So obviously he was going to have to pace himself, and maybe that's why we didn't see this all through the fight. But Anderson took it well and came right back at him. They fought, they exchanged back and forth, and and then the bell rang. After the fight had been completed, I totally saw Anderson Silva winning it, easily. It wasn't even hard to even discuss this. It was pretty amazing. It was electrifying, Got my bones chilling to see vintage Anderson Silva. This is somebody, that's 46 years old, and somebody that we've seen glimpses of, and now we got a really good sizable, piece, and the audience loved it. The commentators, there was one commentator that followed MMA, but the other commentators are obviously into boxing, and they weren't really sure how Anderson was going to do. They obviously felt he was the underdog, and they were surprised by his movements. Obviously they weren't used to his movements. They felt that some of it was a little bit unorthodox, but at the end of the day, it was successful. And they were also surprised when they saw Anderson standing in the corner. The crowd went crazy. Everyone got excited. The commentators got excited, and then the MMA analysts knew who he was watching. So this was like vintage Anderson Silva, like I had stated. Now, as the fight came to a conclusion, the person that was scoring on the showcase, had stated that he felt Anderson Silva had also won every round but one. Like I said, I felt like Anderson just went right through the rounds. It was awesome. But when the judges read the scorecards, it made me a little bit weary. They had ruled it in favor of Junior, for the first card. And then the second judge had stated that Anderson got it. They had flipped the scores and Anderson had got the win, And I'm like, please don't screw Anderson. Like, dude, he definitely won this fight. And the judge read the third, or the announcer read the third scorecard from the third judge, and they ruled it in favor of Anderson the Spider Silva getting back on the winning track and improving to 2-1 in boxing. It was awesome. Anderson was extremely happy. Nogueira lifted him up and carried him around the ring. You know what I mean? Like, it was just great. The whole team was ecstatic, and then Canelo Alvarez even came up to the ring. He came on top of it. He shook Anderson. They actually held hands together, and he congratulated him on his victory. He stated that Anderson did win the fight, so that was great to see. Now, with that being said, they did interview Junior, and Junior had stated that he believed the fight was a draw. He felt Anderson didn't do enough. He didn't land enough shots in order to get the victory, but CompuBox Numbers has stated that Anderson had landed nearly twice as many shots compared to Junior. So I'm not quite sure what fight he was watching, because his own team said he was losing every fight, and the CompuBox Numbers said he was being outstruck, and then you just had, everybody else that was basically saying he won the fight besides that one judge. I would say he was a corrupt judge at the end of the day. Now, with that being said, Anderson was happy. He was very appreciative of Canelo coming up to him, very humble, but he definitely felt he got the victory, and I myself was very happy that I got to see Anderson Silva get back into the winning column. Now, it doesn't end there, guys, because now we're all quite wondering, what does Anderson Silva go from here? He said, he has to support his team, help them get ready for their fights, his son and his other teammates, but he would be open to getting back and fighting there. But he also stated he has nothing to prove, and another interview afterwards. So we're going to see where Anderson goes from there. With that being said, Jake Paul reared his head and, congratulated Anderson Silva and stated he would love to see Anderson Silva face off against Roy Jones Jr. on the undercard of his card. So that'd be really interesting. This fight was supposed to happen way back in the day, and the UFC did not want to allow Anderson Silva to go face off in boxing. And, now is the opportunity. Obviously, they're a lot later in their careers, And it'd be interesting to see what would happen between these two. But then you have Logan Paul, who's also interested in fighting Anderson the Spider Silva. So that would be pretty interesting as well. But me, I would definitely love to see the Spider get into it with Jake Paul and put him to sleep. That's just my, suggestion. That's my feeling. That's what I would love to see. Because obviously, Jake Paul had no intention of calling out the Spider, who's basically twice his age. Now, guys, with that being said, go to the comment section below and let me know what you think Anderson should do. Should he just retire and ride off into the sunset? Should he face off against Logan Paul, Roy Jones Jr., or go after Jake Paul? Let me know what you guys think below. Don't forget to go to competitiveorigins.com. Type in promo code MMA154 so you can get 10% off this whatever it takes Competitive Origins t-shirt. Thank you for tuning in today, guys. I'm BPC, and remember, you've been competing since conception, whether you're competing against yourself or others. Competitive Origins.